Yeah.
1 minute.
So Jun, sino Ateneo? Who was the Ateneo student activist during your era?
Edjo.
Yes. Okay.
Nag-split kasi sila Jimmy, sila Chito, they were more radicalized.
Right.
Kami Edjo noon,
Moderates.
kasama namin mga kolehyala.
Yeah.
Tapos later naging radical na rin si Edjo.
Correct.
Oo. Pero sila Jimmy, sila Chito, radical talaga. Nag-split kami sa Zamboanga.
Oh, yeah. NUSP.
NUSP. I was there.
I remember that. I was there.
Oh, the moderates and the radicals. Sila Jimmy, sila Chito, nasa radicals. Edjo, nasa moderates, kasama namin mga taga
Teresiana.
St. Teresa's, Holy Spirit, Mary Noel.
Yes.
Sila Jimmy, sila Chito, ano sila? At sa UP. Si Eric Macolino, the radical.
Yamko.
Yeah.
Good
Hello,
afternoon,
Keith.
everybody.
Hello, Keith. Hi, Keith. June Palafox here.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon. Keith Harrison, you're the moderator.
Good afternoon. My name is Keith Harrison, and I'm going to be the moderator this afternoon. And I would like to please advise you of a couple of the house rules. Firstly, please be advised that microphones for non-program participants will be muted to help keep the background noise to a minimum. May we request that visiting Rotarians and guests, please type your name into the comments box, either with your club affiliation or the Rotarian who invited you, so that we can properly acknowledge you later in our program. For our open forum, after the talk of the speaker, in case you want to ask a question, again, please use the raise the hand button or simply notify us by typing in the comments box. Alternatively, you may wish to type in your question and we will try to accommodate it during the question and answer time. Please don't leave please don't leave until after the response of our president, as we will then have a group photograph along with our speaker. And now I would like to please ask our president, Louis Aseoche, to call the meeting to order.
Good afternoon. I call this meeting to order.
I'd now like to pass across to our director, Inigio Garcia, to give us an invocation, please.
Thank you, Keith. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So let's remember when the holy presence of God. We are thankful for this day that you have given us. For us, it's a blessing to listen to our speaker for today, an opportunity to learn from his talk, understand the challenges on the issues that he may discuss on the topic China Matters. May we appreciate and use each day that comes to us. We continue to pray for strength and guidance for each day as it comes, for each day's duty, for each day's problems to help our family and our countrymen. May we be challenged to give our best always, as you have given the ability of each and every Rotarian and attendees who are present in this RC Makati meeting today. Please make us your instrument of change with your perpetual mercy and grace, O Lord. Amen.
Thank you very much. I would now like to ask that we listen to the national anthem, which will be followed by the Rotary hymn from the Rotary Club of Makati hymn.
We're the Rotary Club of Makati, and together we stand proud. We are leaders with integrity, always ready to serve humanity, always living by the four-way test, building goodwill and peace along the way, giving hope to the world. We're the Rotary Club of Makati, prepared to aid our fellow men, as Rotarians we live to lead. We believe in service above self, and if our dreams succeed, we're the Rotary Club of Makati, and together we stand proud. We are leaders with integrity, always ready to serve humanity, always building goodwill and peace along the way, giving hope to the world. We're the Rotary Club of Makati, giving hope to the world. The Rotary Club of Makati.
I would now like to remind everybody of the four-way test of Rotary of the things we think, say, or do. And if you remember, this was introduced by Herbert Taylor in the 1940s, so we've had it a long time. Firstly, is it the truth? Secondly, is it fair to all concerned?
Is it fair
Thirdly,
to the ones concerned?
Fair to all concerned.
will it build goodwill and better friendships?
Will it build goodwill and
Goodwill and better
friendships?
friendships.
And fourthly, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Will it be
Will it be
beneficial
beneficial to all concerned?
I would now like to greet people, members and their aunts on their birthdays and wedding anniversary celebrations. Firstly, the birthdays. I would like to say that on the 16th of September, we have Gani Buenafor and George Drysdale. And on the 20th of September, we have Director Sunny Tambutin. On the Rotarian side, we have on the 16th, Ditas Antonio, 17th, Charina Garcia, my wife, on the 20th, Rachel Harrison, along with Et Libria on the 20th September. We also have wedding anniversary of PP Felix and Tessie Amparo on the 17th of September. So happy birthday to all of those and congratulations on your wedding anniversary. I'd now like to introduce the visiting Rotarians and guests. Firstly, the guests, visiting Rotarians, of course, here. LCP Leth Malapad of RC Makati Southwest. Welcome. LCP Gina Ramos of RC Alabang Center Point. LCP Reb Buenaventura of RC Parañaki South. LCP Rachel Harrison, she did dial in to check if I was really here, of RC Makati Business District. LCP Justin Ho Goi Shun of RC Alabang Madrigal Business Park. LCP Loida Enro of RC Metro Calibo. PP Megs Lun of RC Metro Calibo. PP Rick Chua. And then I also have Rotary Anne and Nelly Bengzion. Mita Solvian, welcome to both of you. Men Chu, first Anne, sorry. Yes. FPA Menchu Pascual, FPA Yvonne Kuan, Maria Luisa F. Chu, Mylin Rial, sorry, back to Rotarians again, of RC Alabang Centerpoint, and Fabcon PH, and the wife Rotary and of Rotary and Tess, the wife of our president, is also on the line. So welcome to all of you visiting Rotarians and guests. We're very, very pleased to have you join our meeting today.
And also to my classmates, Buddy Montreal and Sokka, who they just entered.
Okay. I'm sure it can still count as a makeup.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd now like to invite Rina Cadano, who is the project director of the Multinational Foundation for the HEAL program, to hand over, receive a check for the initial amount of 200,000 pesos out of a total of 300,000 for our support for 10 learners in the HEAL program.
Thank you. The real check will be forthcoming. Okay.
I would like perhaps
one more. Now with the authentic check, the real check. Thank you.
Miss Cadrana, would you like to say just a few words?
Yes. In behalf of the HEAL Home Education and Livelihood Program learners, there are 10. And in behalf of the Multinational Foundation, we would like to thank President Louis Aseoche and the whole board of directors of Rotary Club of Makati. More power. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to call on President Louis for the president's time. Oh, sorry.
Project Orientes for the update.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. Yes, I can't read my own names. I'd now like to call on Roger Coloriantes. Get the name right, sorry.
That's right.
Colantes, to update on the YMCA Young Entrepreneurs Program.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Kit. I will ask my friend Ron to flash the slides, about 4 of them. Yep. It's coming out. So Ron?
Yeah.
All right. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present an update on YEP. YEP is the Youth Empowerment Program, an undertaking of Makati YMCA in partnership with Rotary Club of Makati, under the inspired leadership of President Louis Aseoche and past President Peter Manzano. YEP is an empowering Makati's youth to become startup founders and entrepreneurs who will drive sustainable economic development through socially oriented entrepreneurship. YEP offers a specially curated program, certification program for young entrepreneurs to help them succeed in their venture. It includes business ideation, business model canvas, business pitching, pre-seed financing, and business growth mentoring. It addresses the need of the youth today for an alternative career pursuit and opportunity to make a difference. So this is the Integrated Youth Entrepreneurship Program. It consists of the Next Gen Founders Institute. It's a 1-month entrepreneurship certification and a 6-month startup incubation program under Rotary Club of Makati's seed financing and Business Mentorship Program. YEP is the first end-to-end ecosystem that ensures high success rate for first-time entrepreneurs by finding a unique business idea, turning it into a plan, prototyping it, pitching it to seed investors, obtaining seed financing from RCM Makati, and getting expert mentorship. And I would like to ask my partner, Reggie Nolido, to explain the expert mentoring from our RCM members.
Thank you, Roger. All right. Basically, the program, as Roger has already explained, is for us to find the youth of Makati who want to put up their own businesses, and we want to encourage them to put up these businesses, and for several of them to even invest into their businesses. Now, in order for them, or in order for us to be able to ensure, or at least guide them in the process of building their businesses, there is a need for us to appoint or to assign some of our members to participate as mentors in this program. So they will actually be hands-on helping out some of these entrepreneurs to have in their businesses. Now, I'm so happy to report that we already had confirmations from some of our members. I would like to thank Glenn Gatuslao, David Aboitis, Bong Villatuya, who else is there? Excuse me. Well, of course, I'll also be helping out there. And then, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, several more, no, from amongst our members who have agreed, no. Si Reggie Ponferrada, I'm sorry, who have already agreed to be part of the mentors, and then hopefully we will be able to guide them to better businesses in the future. So I throw it back to Roger for now.
Yeah. So our program will start already started. So we have our first input, 2 slides before this. We have our stage 1. We have already brought in application about 60 entrepreneurs. They are going to go to a 1-month program next month called the Next Gen Founders Institute. And after that, they will have a business model canvas workshop. Then they will do pitching. And then we will provide them with pre-seed equity, loan, or grants. And then the mentorship already mentioned. So I just want to highlight the program, 2 slides after. We have the Advocate Series. We feature experts in the area of agility and grit, sustainability and social entrepreneurship, technopreneurship and disruptive innovation, and superpreneurship in the age of disruption. Then after that, we have the Founders Series. These are, next slide please. These are founders who are successful Filipino founders who have succeeded in food entrepreneurship, RJ Ledesma, e-commerce, AI in biodiversity, and serial entrepreneurship and business funding by Francis Simisim, all well-known local founders. Then we have, of course, already mentioned our mentor learning series featuring Francisco Colaico, Attorney Reggie, Suan Nolido, and of course, still to be invited. Okay.
Andy Manyala. No, Andy agreed already. Andy agreed already. Okay. Thank you, Andy.
For 5 of these speakers are all RCM Makati. We invite other members of the our sister Rotarians. If you have some interested young Rotary Acts or youth in your area, especially in Makati, we would love to enroll them for free in this Next Gen Founders Institute 12 session, 1 hour and a half each with a certificate at the end, and possibility to win 100,000 in equity funding and become Makati's next new business entrepreneurs. So
partner, if I can also add, no? Actually, how is it that you can participate into this program? Aside from being mentors, we're also looking at some of you to participate in the ongoing learning sessions we will have for our entrepreneurs. No? So we will have featured subject matter experts. In fact, we've already tapped one of them. Bom Villatuya will talk to us about cash management also. So that's and we will have several other programs that you can talk about. So to the experts in the club, please participate with us and be part of the learning of our young people.
Yeah. So last statement I want to make is the main theme of our YEP learning series is disrupt or be disrupted, the mindsets of the next gen entrepreneurs. As Harvard Professor Clay Christensen said, disruptive innovation can hurt you if you're not the one doing the disrupting. So we're teaching all the young entrepreneurs to start disrupting the economy because that is the future where we're going. Thank you so much, Kit.
Thank you, guys.
Reggie.
Thank you very much, Roger Colantes and PP Reginolido, for a very interesting introduction to what is going on there. Now it is President's time, and I would ask that I pass back to LCP President Louis Asiache.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, PP Reggie and Roger Colantes, for that welcome disruption. Welcome, Professor Jaime, or should I call Jaime FlorCruz. Thank you for accepting our invitation. We are already excited to hear an insider's view of the Middle Kingdom, a country which I find fascinating during my high school years in world history. Thank you as well to Director Philip Sullivan for facilitating the invitation to Jimmy. Just a few announcements for our meetings, upcoming meetings. Next Tuesday, 21st of September, we will have DOST Secretary Fortunato de la Peña as our guest speaker. It will be a joint meeting with RC Baguio Summer Capital and RC Metro Calibo. On the 28th, it will be our governor's visit, as District Governor Georgie Tan will be our main speaker. Yes, the governor will pay us a visit even as I have yet to have my induction, the date of which keeps changing along with how the government changes its quarantine settings. Please find time to attend those two upcoming meetings, both virtual. On our service project agenda last September for my birthday, our club participated as co-host at the Sandugo Bloodletting Project, which was held in our clubhouse. The project was initiated by RI District 3830 in partnership with the Philippine Red Cross. The bloodletting activity gathered 26 bags of blood from 30 potential volunteers, including 3 from our staff. I would like to thank IPP Peter Manzano, District 3830 Chair for Partnership, for joining me on this project, and John, Richard, and Ria for donating blood. Last Thursday, September 9, the club turned over its third rehabilitated emergency quarantine facility, or EQF, to the Philippine Army at the Philippine Army Gym in Fort Bonifacio, BGC. The officers of the Philippine Army came up with a short program. Grateful they are for us helping ease up the congestion in their isolation facility. Please watch this RCM video news of the project.
COVID-19 infections continue to rise because of the emerging variants that trigger daily new infections, registering an all-time high the past few days. Thus, there is greater need for isolation facilities to decongest cramped hospitals and medical centers, which can no longer accommodate the increasing number of patients. Today, September 9, the Rotary Club of Makati, led by President Louis Asiache, with Secretary Eddie Galvez and past President Bimbo Mills, once again braved the pandemic to turn over its third rehabilitated emergency quarantine facility, or EQF, to the Philippine Army at the Philippine Army Gym in Fort Bonifacio, BGC. During the short program, Colonel Napoleon de Vera, Deputy Commander in charge of the COVID Response Unit of the Philippine Army, welcomed the guests and expressed his utmost appreciation to the club for the help given to the Army.
Your act of kindness has shown that caring for our Filipinos, fellow Filipinos, is not just about giving. It's about sustainability and ensuring continuous service for future beneficiaries.
President Louis, in his keynote address, stressed the importance of sustainability in any of the projects that the Rotary Club of Makati undertakes. He said that the club doesn't just make a project and then forget about it.
But just be secured in the thought that should any one of you or your dependents, the female members of your staff, would get stricken with COVID-19 in the line of duty, you know that you have a white tent from a white night that you can use right inside your headquarters. This is Rotary Club of Makati's contribution, a drop in the ocean of service for humanity.
With a rehabilitated and improved facility, the Army HQ EQF, an air-conditioned facility, has 18 cubicles and can accommodate a maximum of 36 beds, with mattresses and beddings, and separated by dividers. It has a toilet and shower room, and will be manned by a complement of doctors and nurses. The emergency quarantine facility was a project of the RC Mac Cares in 2020 during the term of past President Bimbo Mills at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Army HQ EQF, which was actually the first facility to be inaugurated in April 2020, has already served over 1,000 patients since its construction. When the club conducted a needs assessment visit last month, the committee headed by Secretary Eddie Galvez found out that the facility needed substantial repairs on its floorings and roofs. This quarantine facility in Philippine Army Gym, which Colonel De Vera dubbed as the White Tent, is the third among 4 sites that was rehabilitated by RCM in collaboration with Benjo Builders. The first one was in the city of San Juan, which was turned over on August 16, and the other one at the Hospital ng Muntinlupa on August 19. Indeed, as mentioned by President Louis during his speech, through the rehabilitations of its donated EQFs, the Rotary Club of Makati is contributing to helping save lives hand in hand with changing lives.
So thank you again to Secretary Eddie Galvez and past President Bimbo Mills for accompanying me to this turnover the Philippine Army. The Army is actually asking for more isolation tents from our club. That is how terrible this surge is. Please note that on Thursday, September 16, we will be turning over again 2 isolation tents for the Makati PNP. Special thanks to Rotarian Dan Lim for the discounted rates on the tents. On Friday, we have been invited to co-host an online teaching seminar hosted by the newly chartered Rotary Club of Makati Circle of Friends. This will be at 2:30 p.m. September 17. Governor Joji will be doing the inspirational talk. Please join us there as well. And the following day, Saturday, September 18, the district will be holding its community service seminar. It will start at 9 a.m. and it will cover RI President Meta's 3 main initiatives and path to sustainable projects. Our very own past President Reggie Nolido will talk again on Global Grants Guideline. So let us be there to lend an ear and give support to our future Governor Reggie. Lastly, I am happy to inform you that our Save Our Reefs project has received a Gawad Pasasalamat Award by the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources during their 58th Virtual FishCon yesterday, September 12. The project is a major environmental initiative of the club in line with the Rotary 7th area of focus. We planted 210 reef buds last Rotary year in the Sea of Narvacan, Ilocos Sur. Our Save Our Reef project aims to help revive and regenerate nearshore marine ecosystems. Congratulations, immediate Past President Peter Manzano, for this very laudable project, and we hope that we can all visit the site soon. That's it, Kit. Take it away.
Thank you very much, President. I'd now like to invite Director Philip Sullivan to introduce our guest speaker for today.
Oh, thank you, Keith. Good afternoon to my fellow Rotarians, ANs, and friends from the Rotary clubs outside of outside of Rotary Club of Makati. On each Friday morning of the month, a group of friends get together at 7:30 a.m. for what we call a virtual kapihan. And these are friends from all around the world, and they get together to talk about issues of the day, issues in the Philippines, issues in the United States, issues in China. And among this group of friends is our guest speaker, Jaime FlorCruz. He's obviously the China expert. One of the, at each session, we ask ourselves, did we solve any problems of the world today? And most of the time, the answer is no. But the fact is, we enjoy each other's company. We enjoy the rich conversation that takes place during these meetings. And I thought it would be nice for the Rotary Club of Makati to be able to get some insights from the China expert in our group, our guest speaker today, because he has had extensive experience in China, as you will see when I introduce him and talk about his background. And those insights are particularly useful in today's world because, as you know, and as we all know, basically, China is essentially, maybe next to the United States, one of the key countries that the Philippines needs to deal with, right, in this day and age. So with that, allow me to introduce our guest speaker for today. Jaime FlorCruz is currently an adjunct professor at Peking University, and he is a veteran China watcher and foreign correspondent in China. He was CNN's Beijing bureau chief and correspondent responsible for strategic planning of the network's news coverage of China from 2001 to 2014. Prior to that, he served as Time Magazine's Beijing bureau chief and correspondent from 1982 to 2000. And before that, he was the Beijing reporter of Newsweek. He served as China's chairman of the Fortune Global Forum, a meeting of global business and political leaders, which was held in Beijing was held in Beijing 2005, in Chengdu in 2013, and then again in Guangzhou in 2017. Actually, Jimmy was born in the Philippines in 1951. So some of us may ask, how did he end up in China in the early 1970s? Jimmy was a vocal anti-Marcos activist during his college days, just like I understand our fellow Rotarian June Palafox was. He was on a 3-week tour in China in September of 1972, when then President Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law and rounded up hundreds of his opponents and critics. Jimmy ended up in forced exile in China. When his Philippine passport expired in 1973, he became stateless and was stranded in China for the next 12 years. While in China, Jimmy studied, worked, and traveled extensively. He worked in a state farm in Mao Zedong's birthplace in Yunnan province. He worked in a fishing corporation in Shandong, and then moved to Beijing in 1974, where he took 2 years of extensive Chinese language study at Beijing Languages Institute. So there he received a BA in Chinese history from Peking University. This is actually his second degree because he had received a BA in advertising from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines in 1971, while he was still living here. Jimmy reported extensively on China beginning in 1981 after joining Newsweek. In 1982, he joined Time Magazine's Beijing bureau and served as Beijing bureau chief up to the year 2000. He received the Edward R. Morrow Press Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York in 2000. He was the first non-American journalist actually chosen for this prestigious fellowship. So Jimmy has witnessed and reported on the most significant events in China in the past 3 decades. In addition to his on-air reporting, Jimmy contributed regularly to CNN.com and wrote a weekly online column called Jaime's China, offering analysis of China's society and politics. He is considered the dean of the Foreign Press Corps in Beijing, having been the longest serving foreign correspondent in China until his retirement in 2015. He's a two-term president of Foreign Correspondents Club of China and the founding president of Peking University International Students Alumni Association. He is the co-author of Massacre at Beijing, a book about the crackdown in Tiananmen Square, and Not on Our Watch, a book about campus journalists during the martial law years in the Philippines. He's currently writing a book entitled The Class of 1977, which is a personal account of the time he studied at Peking University from 1977 to 1982. So Jimmy is fluent in English, Filipino, and Mandarin. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome to speak to us today our guest speaker, Jaime FlorCruz, the adjunct professor at Peking University. Jimmy, it's your floor.
Thank you. When Philip and later Louis invited me to speak to RC Makati, I readily said yes, because there's a soft spot in my heart for Rotary. My late father was a loyal Rotarian. He was a past president of RC Malolos, our hometown. My mother was a Rotarian, and I attended many Rotary events. I grew up hearing about the four-way tests, and I am aware and I applaud our Rotary's good deeds and advocacies in many RCs in the Philippines as well as overseas. So I'm really pleased to join you today and share with you some of my perspective and insights about China, the China that I knew the past nearly 50 years. Now, China matters. That's the title. It matters because of many things. But so I'll tell you a little bit about the different China matters that's close to me or that I experienced. And I would like to use a PowerPoint just to help me breeze through the very complex China story that I wish to share with you. To tell you my story, I have to begin, I'll have to take you back to August 21, 1971. That was the day when we went to China. This was my first passport ever. And at that time, we had to show along with it this yellow card, which may now see again re-emerge in our lives. That was just to show that I was vaccinated with smallpox and other epidemic diseases. So this was my passport. And in there, stamped in this passport actually was a note saying that this travel document is not valid for travel in communist-controlled regions, and it ticks off the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, China, Vietnam, Korea, etc. But that edict did not prevent us from going to China, because in that year we received an invitation from the China Friendship Association to form a 15-member Philippine youth delegation for an all expenses paid study tour of China. So August 20, I boarded a Cathay Pacific. I sat in 19A seat and flew to Hong Kong, where I regrouped with 14 other youth leaders to pick up our China visa in Hong Kong. Destination, China. This was our group. I think the first day or two in Beijing, 15 of us, mostly student leaders from Metro Manila, UP, Ateneo, La Salle, Sambeda. There was a young professional journalist, Ros Galang from Manila Times, a young professor from UP Los Baños. And then we had a Benedictine monk, Carlos Tayag, as well as a young Muslim youth leader, Nizam Abu Bakr. So the idea was to form this cross-section of Philippine youth so that we could visit China and also have exchanges with our counterparts in Beijing. This is us, and you could tell how different we were from our Chinese counterparts. That's me wearing long hair and tight pants, which was typical of youth at that time. This was us. Behind us was Chairman Mao's birthplace, the Mecca of China. And that's me looking more like Li Xiaolong, Bruce Lee. And this was the Beijing, the first few sites we saw. This was Tiananmen. Look how different it was. Very few cars, a lot of bicycles. There was this old man selling popsicle on the left. And I think this kind of gives you an idea of what we saw of China some 50 years ago. We thought it was the nirvana, the socialist nirvana, where people lived, plain lives, but egalitarian lives. Of course, we also saw how poor and backward China was. A lot of things were done manually using very primitive tools like these transport. China then in 1971 was still midway through the so-called Cultural Revolution, which was a political campaign that divided China, created chaos in China, both in the leadership as well as on the ground. Red Guards formed, and even children took part in this campaign. A lot of officials were humiliated for being class enemies or capitalist roaders. We didn't see the violent part of the Cultural Revolution. The Cultural Revolution started in 1966 and ended in 1976. So by 1971, China was trying to douse down the radicalism of the Cultural Revolution. So we didn't really see this anymore. We didn't see big parades or fighting in the streets. But China remained divided ideologically. This is the perennial slogan at that time. Wherever I turned, there was this slogan, never forget class struggle. This was Chairman Mao's behest or edict that China was divided according to classes, the working class and the capitalist or exploitative class. And the society was divided that way. Schools were divided that way. Factories were divided along that ideological line. Even families were divided along that ideological line. Now, Philip already outlined what happened to me and to my group. So when we were visiting Beijing, soon as we arrived on August 21, there was a bombing incident in Plaza Miranda. You'll remember this, which was used as the excuse to suspend the writ of habeas corpus. And at the same time, arrested a lot of political opponents of the Marcos administration, including student activists like us. So for fear of getting arrested, 5 of us were forced to stay. And then another year later, when martial law was declared, we had to stay in an open-ended way. So what do you do in China when you cannot go home? The first several months, we asked our host if we could go to school. The universities were still closed because of the Cultural Revolution. So we said, well, we want to earn our keep and learn something about China. So our host said, well, in that case, maybe you would like to spend some time working on the farm. And just like all our high school graduates and educated youth are doing. So we said, yes. It sounded like a romantic idea, right? We thought we could get an up-close look of the Chinese society and learn from China. So we went to Hunan province. When we heard Hunan, we looked at the map and we saw Hunan as south of Beijing. So we thought, great, the weather there must be much warmer than frigid Beijing. But we were wrong, because in December that year, 1971, when we first arrived on the farm, it was snowing ferociously. But still, it was, this was our crucible. Looking back, our months in Hunan province as a farmer gave me a unique perspective of what China was like at that time. And it has become kind of my baseline whenever I think of how much China has changed. And this is me after some time in Hunan and later in a fishing corporation in Shandong. In 1977, I enrolled at Peking University to study Chinese history. 1977 was a landmark year because that was the first year when China reinstituted the what they call Gaokao, or the National College Entrance Exam, which for 10 years was scrapped during the Cultural Revolution. So this is the year they started it, where some 5 million Chinese high school graduates or recent graduates took the exam for about 500,000 openings or slots in Chinese universities and colleges. So that meant that a lot of the students that I enrolled with had spent some time in the farms and factories, but also kept up with their academics. And so they did well in this first Gaokao, or National Entrance Exam. I can tell you more about that later, but anyway, I graduated in spring of 1972. This was our graduation picture. No, 1982. This was our graduation picture. No ceremony, no pomp, no togas, no throwing of the hats. Just this simple group picture in front of one of our classrooms. I am seated there on the right-hand corner. First row. And then I ended up, I was an accidental tourist in China, but also an accidental foreign correspondent in China. In my senior year at Peking University, I started to do research work. I worked as a researcher for Newsweek. That only meant clipping and filing stories. I went to the office 2 times a week, helping with clipping and filing and sometimes translation from Chinese to English for the bureau chief, Melinda Liu. And she would weave in whatever research I've done into her stories. Then my luck came. In December 1981, the trial of the so-called Gang of Four, including Chairman Mao's widow, took place. And Melinda, the bureau chief, happened to be on a long Christmas vacation in the United States, and she couldn't return to Beijing immediately. So in desperation, Newsweek asked me to file reports about this. So this is my first byline story for Newsweek. Somewhere at the bottom of this story was my tiny byline. And that started my career as a foreign correspondent in China. Working as a foreign correspondent in China is, of course, a very rewarding job. It took me to many exotic places. I've been to all the major cities and all the provinces in China. This picture was in Tibet in early 1982, just when Tibet was not even open. So I saw Tibet in its very raw and spontaneous state. Here I'm hanging out with the Tibetan traders around the Bakhor Palace in central Tibet. I also had the pleasure of meeting a lot of interesting people, including important politicians. This is me when I interviewed the then Shanghai Mayor Jiang Zemin in the mid-1980s. He had just taken over the job as Shanghai Mayor. And little did I know that years later, in 1989, he became China's state president and the general secretary of the Communist Party. Here, he gave us an interview, an exclusive interview for Time magazine on the eve of his state visit to an ice-breaking state visit to the United States. So for this interview, I'm sorry, I brought back, yeah. I brought back this picture and showed it to him, and which he autographed. And I told him that he hadn't changed much. Even actually, his hair was darker than when I interviewed him as a Shanghai mayor, because like all Chinese politicians, they dye their hair. I also have been lucky to get ringside seats to many historic events in China. This was the 13th Party Congress, the first time that China opened party conferences like this to foreign journalists. Here I am photographed with the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, and Der Spiegel of Germany. Of course, I covered June 1989. For 6 weeks, I covered it from beginning to end. Here I am photographed with Time Magazine's team, Sandra Burton on the left, who was our bureau chief at that time. Robin Moyer was our photographer. Rick Hornick was our former Beijing bureau chief, who returned to help us cover this huge event. I can tell you more about June 4th if you have any questions, but this was one of the highlights of my career. This was a neck-breaking assignment. This was 2002 when Yao Ming was drafted by Houston Rockets as their #1 draft. He and his parents and coach went to our bureau early morning for interviews live as well as taped. So we got the scoop among the television viewers before he got on a live interview with NBA in New York. I also had the pleasure of interviewing China's most photographed iconic image, the image of soft power. This was in the Panda Reserve in Chengdu, Sichuan, many years ago. Not all the stories were pleasant and upbeat. This was in Sichuan in 2008, right after the massive earthquake that rocked Sichuan. This was what was left of a middle school in Wenchuan, the epicenter of the earthquake. This was one of my last assignments before I retired in 2015. I interviewed Michelle Obama when she visited Beijing and my alma mater, Peking University. So I've seen the Red China. I also saw the Open China, and then later I saw the China now under current President Xi Jinping. So Xi Jinping is seeking the China dream, and it's very complex, very ambitious, but in short, this is his China dream: happiness for people and rejuvenation for China as a nation. He hopes that by 2050, China will be prosperous, strong, democratic, cultural advanced, harmonious, and beautiful. He also hopes that it will be globally connected. Now, I can tell you more, but meantime, I'm sure you already know how much China has changed, right? It's now this second largest economy in the world. It's a space power. It is a hub of technology and innovation. It has, a powerful military, they have alleviated some 800 million people from poverty or absolute poverty. Poverty alleviation is one of China's perhaps most admired achievements in the past 20 or 30 years. But prosperity, I'd like to note, has its price, sometimes huge price. There is regionalism. China is not just Beijing or Shanghai. There are many Chinas. There are, modern and rich cities and provinces, but there are also pockets of poverty, and some are being left behind as well. There's also corruption, endemic corruption. They've been trying to curb corruption for many, many years, and it's still going on. Every couple of weeks, I would hear of news out of China of officials, senior officials, provincial and city officials under investigation or under arrest for alleged corruption. There's also environmental degradation. China's growth has come at the expense of polluted rivers, polluted air, polluted soil. They're dealing with it. They're trying to mitigate it, but it has already happened. And China is part of the problem and should be part of the solution if we really want an environmentally friendly nation or globe. Another price is the growing gap between the rich and the poor. Many Chinese have become very rich, some millionaires, even billionaires, but there are still many, a significant number who are still poor or relatively poor. There are still pockets or areas around Beijing and other rich cities, especially those populated by migrants who are still relatively poor. And then finally, the price of prosperity is spiritual void. China has become rich and powerful, but I believe also there are many Chinese who are grappling for some meaning in their life or a moral compass, whatever you want to call it. I call it a spiritual void because communism has been discredited. Many political edicts or theories have been discredited. And what is left to me, I think, is that people are spiritually adrift, searching for meaning in their lives. And instead, there's only what money is what makes the Chinese world go around. Money worship has become kind of a preoccupation for some Chinese. And this is acknowledged even in the Chinese media. And the Chinese government is trying to put something into that void. They're refurbishing, or they're, dusting off old theories, old religions like Confucianism, in an attempt to fill the gap or fill the void. But it's work in progress. So these are some questions that we ponder as China watchers. Is China's rapid growth sustainable? I think the answer is obvious. It's not. China cannot keep on growing rapidly, double-digit growth, which we've seen in the past 20 or 30 years, because the environment cannot sustain it, the economy cannot sustain it, and I think China is aware of that and is trying to recalibrate the economy and look for other engines of growth so as not to overheat the economy. The second question is, can China keep progressing without political reforms? The theory is, or the convention is, okay, China has successfully adopted some capitalist or market economy theories and approach without changing radically its political reforms, unlike the former Soviet Union. So we still have an authoritarian, even Leninist political system, while allowing experimentations on the economic reform and other aspects. But can China keep changing, keep progressing, while keeping the lid on its political system? Another question is, can China keep its Chineseness? We've seen China open its door through tourism, diplomacy, business, trade, and yes, the media, the internet. China has become really more porous than it has ever been. And I've seen that in the past 40 plus years. It's been remarkable how China has been open to outside influences, outside thoughts. But the question now is, can China keep on opening its door? Can China keep its door open and still retain its core values, its Chineseness? I think that's being debated in China now. And we've seen efforts, measures taken recently, I think precisely to address some of the questions that I am ticking off now. Another question is, can China coax the mainland into a peaceful reunification? Can China coax Taiwan into a peaceful reunification? Why is this important? China is a very nationalistic country, just like we are, and they believe that Taiwan is part of China, and China wants to reunify Taiwan by hook or by crook. They still are offering a peaceful way out or a peaceful process. They said they are willing to wait, but I wonder how long China can wait, as Taiwan seems to be veering away from the mainland, cutting the various links or the umbilical cord between Taiwan and the mainland. Finally, can China succeed? If China succeeds in its endeavor, in Xi Jinping's ambitions, in reaching the China dream, will China be a good or a bad factor for global peace? Will China be yet another superpower, yet another imperial power, yet another global policeman? Or will it be, in fact, a force for global harmony and peace? I don't think there are easy answers to all these questions that I mentioned, but I leave that to you because I think that these are the questions that we as China watchers keep in mind, but these are also the questions that we as China's neighbors should keep in mind. All these years as a student, as a journalist, and now as a teacher, I've tried to follow this approach that China is a glass half full, not a glass half empty. And in part, that's because of my long perspective. My 50 years of perspective in China makes me appreciate the small changes that I've seen and that we still will see. And that's why I consider China as a glass half full. I also think that China is a story that's best told in context. It's very easy to read China, to read about China in small doses or in small stories. But I think that the best way to understand China is to look at it in context, in a historical context, in historical perspective, and in a holistic way, because China is a multi-part, like teleseries. You cannot just watch a TV series, one episode, and know the whole story, right? The same as understanding China. It's a mosaic. It's a mosaic. It's a picture that can be pieced together in bits and pieces.
But it's a bias, Ashley.
It's a triangle. It's a round thing. It's a colored red. It's colored black. It's colored white. It's a mosaic. So you have to really step back to be able to figure out what China is like, what the picture of China, instead of looking at the small parts up close. So finally, I hope that I can help you cast off some myths and stereotypes about China. And there are many, not you, but many, I think many Filipinos still think that the Chinese are still wearing Mao jackets or even Qing Dynasty pigtails. No longer, right? China has changed. The Chinese have changed and have entered the modern world. Many of us think that Chinese are badoy, madumi, bastos, maingay, pasaway, unruly, uncouth. And yes, there are some, but we cannot generalize them into a stereotype image. We also think that China is hidebound, is isolated. They were 50 years ago or even 40 years ago, but no longer. China is a monolith, that Chinese have no freedoms, not anymore. China has become more diverse, not totally, but more diverse than before. The Chinese enjoy personal freedoms. No, they don't have the kind of democratic freedoms that we have. They cannot, practice one person, one vote, direct election. Their media is still censored, but they have personal freedoms. They may now choose the husbands or wives of their choice, or girlfriends or boyfriends. They can make their sexual preferences too. They can choose jobs. They can choose residences and many other freedoms that they didn't have for many years. China, the Communist Party is not proselytizing its communist ideology overseas. They're not trying to convert people like us here to join the Communist Party. In fact, they have cut relations with the Philippine Communist Party. The Chinese are not really atheists. I mean, there are atheists. The Communist Party members are atheists, but many Chinese believe in certain religions, Buddhism, Christianity, Catholicism. They are allowed to embrace their choices of religions, except that they are not allowed to proselytize outside the churches or temples of their choice. The other stereotype is that the Chinese have gone capitalist. Yes, they have adopted capitalist practices. They allow bankruptcy. They have, they allow joint ventures and solely owned enterprises. They trade. They have bourses, but they have not really gone capitalist in the sense that land is still owned by the state, and many of the the capital tools are still in the hands of the government or the state. Oh, there's another stereotype. The Chinese are only good at math and science. Yes, they're very good at math and science, but they have also excelled in literature and arts. They have very good painters, artists, performers, and all that. And then finally, the Chinese families can only have one child. That used to be true many, many years ago. They've allowed families to have a second child, and recently they've even allowed a third child. China's problem now has turned from being overpopulated to an aging population. So in short, many of the problems that China face now have been the consequences or results, sometimes unintended consequences, of the problems that they were solving 10, 20, or 30 years ago. And there are new sets of problems that are very arduous, very challenging. And I've seen that, and I've recorded that working for Time Magazine, then later working for CNN. I have been very fortunate to have been granted a ringside seat to one of the biggest stories of our time. And I'm very thankful to my Chinese friends who have taken me for what I am, and also to my mentors and friends in Time Magazine as well as in CNN for giving me that ringside seat. I'll be happy to answer your questions, and thank you for listening. On to you, Keith. Or Philip.
Absolutely fascinating. My first visit to China was in 1989, about in August, I think. So just after all of those things that you were talking about. I would now like to open the floor to questions. I suspect there are quite a number. I believe the best way is to put the question inside the chat box, but otherwise, if you wish to ask the question personally, please raise your hand and we will make sure that we can do that for you. Would you, Rotarian Jun, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you, Keith. Nice to have you here, Mimi. Yeah.
Thank you, Jun.
It might be a segue. I've been to China in 1981. Then from 1989 to 1995, we had a lot of projects in China. And Henry C. brought me there, then the Gokong Ways, Lushitan, and so on. I saw the rapid development and change in culture. But from 1995, the overseas Chinese architects started going back to China, and they became billionaires. They were just architects, but they became developers. And I noticed also many of the local government, like mayors, they have vice mayors for different quarters of the municipality, and these vice mayors are competing like private sector. And also, this is a geopolitical question. with President Biden pulling out of the troops of Afghanistan, some observers are saying that it seems Biden is now open to the idea of tripolar superpower centers. US for the Americas, Russia for Europe, and China for Asia. May we have your insights and comments on that? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, June. You're right. China is a heaven for architects and interior designers. We've seen a lot of projects, ambitious projects, beautiful, some of them, emerging in Chinese cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and even in Mongolia. And they're quite amazing. Now, as to your question, yes, I believe that I think Biden's still trying to figure out how to formulate its China policy. Of course, he inherited some of the policies from the previous administration of Trump, and they are in a very difficult time, I believe, trying to figure out how to coexist. The U.S. trying to figure out this newcomer in the superpower club, and it's not the usual country or nation, because let's remember, China is coming out of a very difficult historical period. We speak of the 100-year century, a century of humiliation. And this sense of nationalism or even ultra-nationalism is very strong among many Chinese, including the Chinese leadership. That harks back to the 100 years when China was subjugated to imperial or colonial rule. Remember how China was divided by 8 nations. Its summer palace was damaged, rampaged by these 8 nations. And to many Chinese, this is a source of humiliation. So now that China has emerged as a powerful economy and a proud country, they are demanding respect, right? And the same way, when they are now dealing with the superpower like the United States, they hope to stand toe-to-toe or, side by side with the Americans as co-equals. And I think that the Biden administration will be well advised to treat China or to take China as a co-equal along with Russia and Japan, and work out with them a modus vivendi whereby all will be given respect, and that they can figure out a way to keep growing without leading to clashes or confrontation. As you know, June, there are people who are saying that the US and China are bound to clash. They speak of this Thucydides curse, whereby when a new imperial power emerges and challenges a de facto power, that they're bound to clash. I hope not, and we should all hope that this is not going to happen in our lifetime, at least. So yes, I think the idea of a tripolar or multipolar world is, I think, something to hope for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you. I would thank you for that. I'm going to ask a couple of questions which are on the come into the chat box. So one is from Bengzon. Mr. Speaker, do you see that Hong Kong is being successfully handled by China, the reintegration of Hong Kong? Because of course it really affects the possibility of a smooth
Yeah.
transition with Taiwan.
Yes, I don't think I wouldn't consider it an ideal way of handling Hong Kong, but I also understand where China is coming from. They have tried to deal with Hong Kong with a kid's glove, so to speak, and that's been our presumption or premise when I watched Hong Kong handover in Hong Kong in 1997. We all thought that China will keep Hong Kong status quo as long as they could, as they promised, because Hong Kong is the goose that lays the golden egg, right? Because Hong Kong still plays a very important role for the mainland. But obviously, China has lost its patience in tolerating the series of protests and the emergence of NGOs and the civil societies that we are all very familiar with and that Hong Kong has had for many, many years. Now, so I think, unfortunately, the ship or the train has left the station on Hong Kong. China already owns Hong Kong, and we can only hope that China will still be able to keep what makes Hong Kong tick, which is still the business and the civil society, the freedoms that they have been enjoying, because without them, I think Hong Kong will start to suffer. We hope that that the mainland will figure out the best way to handle Hong Kong, because you're right. Whatever Hong Kong, whatever happens to Hong Kong, however the transition of Hong Kong evolves, is being watched closely by Taiwan, and that it will affect the way Taiwan's relations with the mainland will evolve. If China wants a peaceful reunification with Taiwan, they have to show that Hong Kong can remain a viable financial hub, and that Hong Kong will remain the entrepot that it has always been all these years. Thank you.
Thank you. I have another question here from past President Reggie Nolido. The narrative here being the Philippines, is that if we challenge China about the arbitral ruling, they will wage war with us. Are they really going to go that far?
Well, I think challenging China, the ruling that favored us in our claim, our territorial claim in South China Sea or West Philippine Sea, it does not necessarily mean that China is going to war with us, or it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to forsake or give up our claim, our territorial claim, if we want to avoid war with China. I think China should understand that just like them, we also are nationalists. We love our country, and we will stand by our territorial claim, which happens to overlap with theirs, and that the best way to handle it is through engagement and through negotiation. I think China acknowledges that, even though they do not acknowledge or accept the arbitral ruling. I still believe that we have to do our best to avoid conflicts or war with China. We happen to be our neighbors. I mean, it's geography. We're stuck with that geographical reality. China is our neighbor, and we have to figure out a way to coexist peacefully with our neighbor. Peacefully meaning we should try to avoid war, because war will not benefit either side. War will be bad for China, just as it will be bad for the Philippines. We speak of a Pyrrhic victory. If China goes to war, and even if they win a war against the Philippines, it will be a Pyrrhic victory because they will inherit a bigger problem. The same is true in its relations with Taiwan. Going to war over Taiwan, they may win it, but they will inherit a huge problem if they do it. I believe that the Philippines should follow an independent foreign policy. Independent meaning we are neither allied to the Chinese nor to America or any other global powers. Can it be done? Why not? Any so-called allies who force us to take sides are not genuine allies. I hope the Chinese will not do it, and I hope America and the other world powers will not force the Philippines to take sides or to get into an alliance. Thank you.
Another question on the chat. We've probably got time for about 3 more questions. Do you think the Chinese government will ever grant freedom of speech in our lifetime? And particularly, I suppose, adding that, although it's not on the question, back into President Xi's comment that by 2050 he will seek
democratic
aim within the Seek the China Dream mission statement.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I am hopelessly optimistic, cautiously optimistic about China. Again, only because I've seen many changes that I thought were never possible when I first got there or when I lived there 40 years ago. I've never thought that I would see the changes that I've seen in recent years.
What happened to Edward? Wala ba siya sa office?
However, you're right. I mean, China still does not have freedom of speech as we enjoy it here in the Philippines. There are elements of, or there are spaces now, limited spaces that allow Chinese to have some sort of freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of expression. I've characterized China or the Chinese media as kind of a bird in a cage. 50, 40, 30 years ago, the Chinese media was in a very, very tiny cage. They hardly could fly in that cage. In recent years, I've seen that cage gotten bigger, and to a certain extent, Chinese freedom of expression also has become bigger, wider, especially because of the internet. Still, they are limited. There is no absolute freedom. Chinese, I know, they speak or they criticize their governments or even leaders around dinner tables in the privacy of their homes or in restaurants. But if they say the same thing in Tiananmen Square, they'll get arrested. So that's what I mean by a limited form of freedom. So it's a modest change. I hope they will keep on changing, but I doubt they'll be able to enjoy the kind of freedom of expression, freedom of speech that we here in the Philippines proudly enjoy. Now, as to the democratic part, sorry. Yes, Xi Jinping spoke of a democratic China. Again, it has to be understood in context. In fact, yes, they actually have been having direct elections on the village level. the past several years. On the barangay level, their equivalent of barangay, I've observed many direct elections in the farms, in the villages. And, they've allowed secret balloting when they chose their barangay leaders. But there were efforts to move that up to the county level, a bigger scale, but they got very nervous about it and they stopped it a few years ago. So I'm not optimistic that I will see it in my lifetime that we will have a democratic China as we know it. I asked the Chinese premier, the former premier Zhu Ji many years ago, if he could imagine a China which elects its leaders like prime minister with a one person, one vote direct election. And he fudged the question. So I also do not believe that it is possible in the near future. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to now take a question from the floor. Director Philip Sullivan asked to make a question. Please go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, thanks, Keith. Jimmy, this question goes back to Tiananmen, okay, the Tiananmen massacre from years ago. Yeah. I have a particular instance of the event because I was actually at the square on June 2nd. Okay, just a couple of days before it all blew up, and it was interesting. I was a banker delivering banking service to the Chinese banking banks, and the discussions at those meetings was very, very candid. It was very pro-democracy, as I would say, even among banking executives. And then it all ended when the square happened. But could you tell us, okay, what did the world not see in that event? Because obviously it's become a very controversial, one of the I guess the biggest events in China in recent history. Let's put it that way. But tell us a little bit of what the world did not actually see, which you as journalists on the ground probably saw. Thank you.
Yeah, so Tiananmen started with a kind of a march from Peking University to Tiananmen by students who wished to memorialize a defrocked Communist Party leader who died unexpectedly a day or two before that. Actually, I was there for that march from Peking University that early morning of April 1989. And I followed them to Tiananmen. They unfurled a big banner memorializing Hu Yaobang, the deceased Communist Party leader. And then I thought that was it. But that emboldened the students because they were not stopped, and more of that happened. It was, and the police tried to stop it physically, shoulder to shoulder. Then the hordes of students in their hundreds just pushed their way back to Tiananmen. And this went on and on until the eve of Gorbachev's historic visit to China in May. Remember, ADB also held its annual meeting there. But before that, so Gorbachev was visiting China. A few days before Gorbachev's visit to Beijing, 100 or so foreign correspondents arrived in Beijing to cover that. So television crews arrived with the ability to do live broadcast from China, from Beijing. And so the students, the protesters, aware of that, started a hunger strike on Tiananmen. And it started with dozens of them, then more came to show support, hundreds, became thousands, tens of thousands. And the media, we were there, plus those 100 foreign journalists who arrived for Gorbachev's visit. So the world started to focus on Tiananmen. And that again also emboldened more protests. The students were joined by other sectors who were not content But I describe them as people in the same bed dreaming different dreams. There's a Chinese saying for that. Why do I say that? The students, were advocating democracy, freedom of speech, perestroika, but they were joined by workers who were either became jobless because of the economic reform that Deng Xiaoping had pushed, because a lot of their factories were bankrupt. They were workers who were also worried about the inflation, the double-digit inflation. There were also other sectors, farmers also, who were, so you have this growing protest on Tiananmen Square. The last probably 1 million people marched through the square in front of the cameras, who were broadcasting to your living rooms at that time, live, some of them. Actually, by June 2nd, I saw, before that, a few days before June 4th, I saw the protest actually dwindling to a few hundred on the square.
I
Right?
saw that.
Yeah,
That I saw.
and some students, leaders already declared it's over. Let's go back to the campuses. But some came back with new issues. 3 intellectuals joined the square and went on another round of hunger strike. So on the eve of the the crackdown on June 4th, there were only a few thousand of them on the square. What do most of you don't know probably is that it's quite true. No, I don't think anybody was killed on the square itself during that crackdown. The tanks came, APCs came, foot soldiers came on the eve of June 4th. And then when the word came, retake Tiananmen, they were met along the way in various intersections by fearless protesters, not all students, who did not believe that the PLA would shoot. And so a lot of the casualties, hundreds of them, died in the outskirts of Beijing along the square, towards the square. By the time they retook the square, they surrounded the square. I had friends who were there. I had a good friend who negotiated with the PLA commanders who surrounded the square, and then eventually allowed a corridor, opened a corridor, so that the hundreds of stragglers on the square during that night or early morning of June 4th were allowed out. Another one thing, I guess, that I should note that you probably don't know, you must have seen the iconic picture of the man in front of the tank, right?
Thanks, yes.
What is little known about it is that that picture was taken the day after June 4th. It was taken from the veranda of Peking Hotel by some photographers who were staking out and happened to look at it from the veranda. If you look at the picture, the man was trying to stop a column of tanks. And actually the tanks were coming out of the square. They were withdrawing from the square, not moving into the square. And the man was trying to stop this column of tanks from withdrawing, from leaving the square. Now, we don't know that. If you don't know the context of that picture, we would all think that the man was trying to courageously stop the column of tanks from moving into the square while they were moving to retake the square. Unfortunately, not. This was taken the day after, when the PLA had already controlled the square and they were withdrawing some of the tanks out of the square. Now, why would the man got in front of the square of the tanks and tried to stop it? That's a puzzling question. my theory is he probably was not part of the protest movement or the ranks of the protesters. He probably did not know the context, and he was just emotionally upset that he saw tanks in the capital, in the Chinese capital. And so he was trying to tell them, get out, get out. And I know I've tried to say this point whenever I could, but I think it's one factoid that is lost in the reporting, in the pictures that we've seen during that historic event.
Thank you. Interesting.
Thank you very much. We have one final question, which will be from Fred Pasquale, and we'll ask him to advise his question. But before we do that, perhaps also you might just, there's been some questions concerning how the Chinese media deals with illegal drugs operations or illegals who operate here on drugs, and how when they get arrested and sent back to China or dealt with here, how does that get reported in China? What happens to them? But I suggest you answer that only after you've also heard what PP Fred is going to say, and perhaps we the two together. Okay.
Yes, go ahead, Fred.
Hi, Jimmy.
Hi, Fred.
Good to see you here.
Thank you.
I used to go to Beijing and see the group of Filipino expats in Beijing when I was in ADB. But anyway, my question is with respect to the clampdown on Jack Ma and Alibaba. Supposedly, it's an attack on technology, which is an important competitive advantage for a country. Would you have some insights on why it was done and for what objective?
Thank you. Let me answer first the China media reporting. And, there's very little that the Chinese media is reporting about the Philippines, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. The bad news, like arrest of Chinese nationals in the Philippines who were connected to or implicated in cases like drug busts or kidnapping, are reported in a very limited way in the mainland. Again, it's along the Chinese concept or mindset that bad news is bad, and that they prefer to report good news, even in places like the Philippines. I hope they will change that. I hope that more reports like that can be read and seen in China to serve as a warning to the mainland Chinese who may be planning or have connections with the Philippines, so that they will become law-abiding residents of the Philippines. We welcome Chinese involvement, participation in the Philippines, in legitimate businesses, but we hope that they will not engage in illegal activities like that. It's bad for the Philippines, but it's also bad for China. It's bad for their image. Now, to Fred's question, yes, there is an ongoing campaign or crackdown on companies like Jack Ma's, Alibaba, even Tencent or Baidu. It's a very complex issue. There are very few countries which will do something like this, which is shooting themselves in the foot. We're talking of billions of money or paper money of shares that have gone down the drain because of this ongoing crackdown. And as I understand it, it's more than just a business crackdown. it's about, they call unfair competition. They accuse companies like Jack Ma's, Alibaba, and Tencent of building green gardens, they call, or walls, which forbids their competitors from getting into their platforms. That's one valid kind of reason. I think many other countries are doing the same in terms of regulatory, setting up regulations against unfair practice competition. But I think it's more than that. I think it's a matter, it's a question of control. I think Beijing leaders have become aware of how much power, how much kind of resources, intellectual, digital resources, data that are in the hands of these big companies like Alibaba and Tencent, that, and even financial financial power that are slipping away from the state, from the government, from government agencies. For example, the data, mining of data has really slipped away from the government control into the hands of these conglomerates or big companies like Alibaba. I believe many other countries, governments are also grappling with this issue. And so while these innovations that Alibaba and the Tencents and the Baidus have have initiated and have made money of, while they are welcome, I think they are now being viewed as antitrust, but also weakening the macro control of the government, including the central bank, on the economic activities that are bound to grow, are bound to proliferate. And this, they finally figure out, they finally decided it's about time we rein them in and take control of the problem in their mind. The question, of course, is this how will this affect business? How will this affect innovation? How will the Chinese youth look at this attempts to reimpose control over the business practices and over the interconnectivity of companies within China as well as with the outside world? I mean, on the one hand, it's admirable that a country like Beijing is willing to do this at a huge expense, and in a way to remind Jack Ma that there is a Xi Jinping, that there is a Communist Party above him, and that he is not the God that he may have thought he was, and that his admirers had thought he was. So it's a sobering kind of episode, and it's still work in progress. We really should watch this closely. It's very important for China and China's future, but also it's important for our businesses here and as well as in other countries.
Thank you.
Thank you. So most interesting. Now I'd like to call upon President Louis to give his response to what has been a very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith.
Right, thank you, Keith. I always think that you cannot retire journalists. Or rather, journalists actually do not retire themselves, most especially if they have been in the action for most of their productive years. They continue to perhaps write, jump on a scoop, or give their considered opinions on burning issues of the day.
Sure, they would no longer be encumbered with deadlines and on-beat assignments, but they just have so many stories to tell. Some embargoed in their minds until they would find the opportune time to write them down or to relate them to us. And which is why I find it so unfair, if not cruel, to find Jaime FlorCruz weighed down by a 20 to 30-minute time cap to narrate to us his 40 years as a journalist in the People's Republic of China, not including the 8 years or so that he spent in exile. I'm sure that his fireside chats with his friends and family would have been more engaging, as he has the luxury of time to tell his stories in a multi-part series. China has always been an enigmatic neighbor to us. One of my favorite topics in world history in high school was, in fact, China. It has been called so many names: the sleeping giant, or the sleeping dragon, or lion, which was a quip attributed to Napoleon Bonaparte, the Middle Kingdom, the oldest civilization in the world. But certainly, sleeping giant it is no more. It has awakened, beginning with the reforms and the opening up it made in the 1970s. Its cheap labor then and government incentives attracted major manufacturers, and the rest, as they say, is history. Now it has become one of the largest economies in the world, and it is also asserting itself as a military superpower. That is why the title of Jaime's talk may be read in two ways: China matters with matters treated as a noun, or China matters with matters treated as a verb. It matters. Perhaps it is the mystery that it is associated with China when viewed from the Western lens that always evokes suspicions. And Hollywood had a great deal to do with that. As a kid, I was fed by Hollywood with stereotypes of Fu Manchu or Charlie Chan. And those stereotypes embedded in one's formative years may have unwittingly lingered, if not reinforced by current events. And whether this Hollywood-inspired stereotyping contributes a great deal to Filipino mistrust of its giant neighbor, or because our Western culture bias continues to feed or to nourish such suspicion, the fact remains that when the object of that stereotype has grown big and mighty, then we must take stock and listen to what it wants to say and what it wants to do. Is China really the proverbial schoolyard bully that others say it is? Is it a neighbor that is sincere in helping us or in bailing us out? Or are we being drawn into this Thucydides trap as the US feeds on our problem at the West Philippine Sea? In the same way that Jaime FlorCruz has been a chronicler of the significant events in China's life as a nation, so should we be keen observers too of our neighbor from across the disputed sea. Only this time without the filters provided or unwittingly ingrained by the West, but shaped by our own experience insofar as our relationship with it. So thank you, Jaime, for taking a break from your retirement and giving us your time. On behalf of the Rotary Club of Makati, our aunts, our district governor, Georgie Tan, the other Rotarians from the different Rotary clubs in our district, most especially my life-changing president, classmates, and all the other guests in attendance, please accept our heartfelt gratitude. And as token of our appreciation, we will be sending you a copy of the 50th coffee table book containing the achievements of our club for the past 50 years, together with this bottle of wine for you to enjoy while browsing our book.
Thank you.
Aside from the wine and the book, Jaime, please accept this plaque of appreciation. The plaque includes a replica of the steel plate that will be put on a reef bud, which will be planted in the Sea of Narvacan in Ilocos Sur. This is part of our Save Our Reefs project, which is in line with Rotary's 7th area of focus. This project, which aims to help revive and regenerate nearshore marine ecosystems, has in fact merited a Gawad ng Pasasalamat Award during the recently concluded 58th FishCon by the BFAR, where the club was represented by our IPP, Peter Manzan. Thank you. And now may I request everyone to open their cameras for our useful photo shoot with our speaker, Jaime FlorCruz. Ron?
Thank you, Louis.
Second window. Last window. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Let me get my gavel. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Jimmy, there's just so many questions in the chat.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Keith
You're
wasn't
welcome.
able
Thank
to
you.
Really
Thank
fun.
Philip.
ask them all.
Thank you, everybody.
Great.
Thank you,
You.
Peter.
See you Friday.
Thank
you.
you, Press. Congratulations.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Sir Jamie.
Thank you.
Bye. God bless.
Thank you, Keith.